What's up guys, this is John with Carrot Customs, and today we're going to show you installing our TTB50 Coil Over Kit on this all-stock Ford F-250 crew cab short bed. It's got a power stroke and a 5-speed, and it's getting our TTB50 Coil Over front suspension. So we're going to show you the process for tearing all the old suspension out, installing our coilover suspension. It's fully bolt-on, and it's actually a pretty straightforward process. So let's start tearing it apart. We're going to be using a lift, but if you don't have a lift, it is totally doable with floor jack and jack stands. But since we have a lift, we're going to do it with a lift and not going to show the floor jack and jack stand process.
All right guys, we've got the truck up in the air. Our 4-post lift is down on the lock, so we know the truck's not going anywhere. My first step is going to be taking the wheels and tires off so that I can get started disassembling the front hubs. All right, I just wanted to note that these can be really difficult to remove, especially if they haven't been off in a long time. This one looks like it hasn't been off in a long time, but luckily this truck's not very rusty. It seems to be pretty well maintained. Sometimes these nuts can be a pain. Those you can deal with. It's getting the spindle off of the knuckle often requires a little bit of a rubber mallet. We're gonna dive into this one. I'm hoping all it's gonna take is just a little tapping. Oh yeah. On this side of the axle, we've got 2 different axle shafts, basically. There's a little stub shaft coming out of the differential, and then the longer shaft that actually comes to the wheel hub here. But there's a boot that connects the 2 of them. Mine still has like the factory style clamps on there, so it's really snug. I just went in there with a screwdriver, kind of loosened up that metal clamp, and I should be able to just pull this sucker out now. There she is. So yeah, there's just a little boot that sits around that to keep that grease all nice and tight. So yeah, little clamp right there. Pretty simple, just shove a little screwdriver in there. Oh, nice. I'm just gonna reseat it, just snug it up so we can get this guy. But sweet. Well, we started on the passenger side. That's kind of the warm-up, the easy side, because it doesn't have the differential bolted in there. Once you get everything disassembled off the end of it and the axle housing out of there, it's pretty light. Next thing to do on this side is just the leaf spring and take out that old shock tower, and we should be good to go. Then we're just moving on to the driver's side. All right guys, we got the wheel and tire off of there, so we've got everything exposed. I'm gonna start by taking my brake caliper off and the caliper mounting bracket. The caliper's held on my truck by 2 13mm bolts, and then the bracket itself is 2 21mm bolts. And then just a tip from me. If you're not gonna be replacing your calipers and you don't have any reason to bleed them, instead of just leaving them hanging by the hose itself, which could cause damage, we like to just throw a bungee cord around it and hook it up to the frame somewhere just to keep the tension off of the brake hose itself. Okay, now that the brake caliper and caliper bracket are out of the way, that means the rotor is free to come out. So first step for disassembling the hub is we'll get these locking hubs off of there. So on my pickup, we've got this version of a wheel hub. It's probably the most affordable and most common kind that we see. There's a few different versions, and luckily we have a stockpile of hub assemblies from our core beams. So we're gonna show you guys all the different versions, the little nuances that go with them, because they're all put together just a little differently. Okay, now that we've got the cover off of it, we have to get the retaining C-clip, in my case, out of there. I find it easiest to just take a couple of picks in there. You find the end of it, get one, pry it underneath, get one down and one to pry it. Come on, come on. Once you get it started, you're pretty much there. And just slide it around and it'll pop right out. Okay, our outside C-clip is out of the way. I'm just going to take a couple of the bolts that were holding the cover on and thread them back in a couple of times. Just to give me something to grab onto. Get that hub out of the way. After that, we've got a C-clip holding the axle into the hub. So let's get in there. Pull that guy off. And this is when you're going to need your, really the only specialty tool is going to be your axle nut socket. We'll get that guy on there. And it goes, there's one nut, and there's an aligning washer. We'll use those picks again. Here she. Now your whole hub should be free. Be careful because your outer bearing is sitting right there. So if you tip it over, it'll just fall out. This is your first real look at your spindle. I can tell you a lot about how well your truck's been maintained, how fresh the grease looks. You can see there's still some red left in this grease, which looks like it's in decent shape. The outer grease, it looks pretty dirty. All right, these spindles, depending on how long it's been since it's been off of the truck, can be a bit of an issue to get off. Not only these 5 bolts holding it on, but just where it's been mated to the knuckle for so long, it's practically welded together, we find. My go-to solution is to just soak all this in WD-40 and then let that soak in for a little bit, bust the nuts off. Usually the big impact can do that. But then as far as like actually breaking it loose from the knuckle, I like to just take a rubber mallet and just smack on this guy a few times in a few different directions. That'll usually work it loose. Oh yeah, easy peasy. There we go, beautiful. Worst comes to worst, you could thread the nuts back onto the threads here and use like a bearing style puller, push on the axle and pull on the snout. That'll also work. Just whatever you do, don't try to shove anything between the mating surfaces because you're just gonna mar it up and that'll prevent it from actually mating completely flush when you put it all back together. And just that little bit of a mar can throw the whole mating surface off and it can cause issues. You don't want this to come failing and falling off your truck. That'd be catastrophic. Oh no, you can see some evidence right here. Somebody has been in there before and they marred it all up. See the chunks taken out of it? So before I reassemble that, I'm gonna sand that smooth so it doesn't prevent the full flush mating of that surface. We call those rookie marks. All right, I'm gonna pull the axle out of the differential, and because of it leaning and flexing out a little bit, it's probably gonna leak out of that seal. So I just threw a little catch can underneath to catch any diff fluid that comes flowing out of there. All right, I'm glad it's at least not seized, but you can hear some play in there. So these are definitely gonna get replaced. These U-joints aren't very easy to get to when the truck's all assembled. So while you're in here, you might as well just swap out some new ones and then you know you'll be headache free for the next, I don't know, 20, 30,000 miles. Okay, axle's out of our way. So my next step to get the knuckle off are upper and lower ball joints.
Well, Grant had to take off for a bit, so I'm stepping in to finish wrapping this up, and he left all the fun stuff for me. So I'm gonna get this lower ball joint loose, then I'm going to take the front drive shaft and disconnect it from the diff, then we'll get it unhooked from the suspension and we'll get the last part of it out. Now we got the front drive shaft to get out. There's a few ways of doing it. You can put the transmission in gear and put the transfer case in four-wheel drive and it'll hold it in position, or you take a pry bar or a long screwdriver to hold it from turning, and then a 1/2-inch wrench to start loosening these little U-joint straps. They come out pretty easy. Okay, so then these just pop right out. I'm gonna get the other side. It's always nice to put your nuts back on just so you don't lose them. When you take the drive shaft out, you want to be extra careful not to pop the caps off of the yoke on the U-joint unless you plan on replacing the U-joint, or if you really like finding lots of needle bearings and trying to repack tiny little needles back in there. So I'm just grabbing both sides of the cross there and let it sit. I'm gonna leave this knuckle on here for Grant to figure out because he doesn't want to replace his ball joints, and I'll let him be responsible for potentially damaging that ball joint trying to get it out. So I'm just using the pry bar just in case this shock does have any, which it does, shock left in it, to make that bolt a little easier to get out. All right, so got the floor jack underneath the beam / differential. Now we're gonna pull the U-bolts and essentially release this whole thing from the leaf springs. These U-bolts can typically be a pain to get off, and if push comes to shove, you can always just cut them. All right, so to take the pivot bolt out, it's an 18 millimeter and a 21 millimeter, and I'm just gonna use the impact gun. You are gonna save these, so you wanna be careful not to damage the threads. You can already see that diff fluid. All right, so we got the driver's side beam out with the differential, and now what you'll need to do is remove the differential from the beam. So you're gonna take out these two bolts right here, and then all of these bolts on the front, and you may have to pry on it a little bit because it is, you know, installed with gasket maker. It's kind of glued on there. But yeah, you'll pop that out and you'll reuse this differential axle shaft knuckle on the beams that we supply. And then before you ship these back for a core return, you'll need to scrape all the grease and grime off of them, pressure wash them, scrape the old gasket off, and just clean them up as best you can before sending them back to us. And then once we get them back, we'll issue your core refund, but you will reuse this diff in the beams that we supply. Now we just need to pull the leaf springs out, the front shackle, and the rear hanger, and we'll be ready to install essentially. This truck has an aftermarket intercooler on it from a Super Duty 7.3, and because of that, the upper bolt for the front shackle, when you try to take it out, it goes directly into the intercooler. So you either have to cut it or loosen your intercooler and lift it up and get that out. It doesn't really matter though, because none of this will be used anymore. The front shackle doesn't get used at all, neither does where it mounts to. But just one thing to note, if you do have an intercooler, it is possible that that is in the way. The only other things to mention are the beam pivot brackets, which are mounted to the engine cross member. They look like this. If your truck has drop beam pivot brackets, you will need factory location pivot brackets, which we have an upgraded, fabricated set of beam pivot brackets that are factory location, and they work really well. Or even if you have the factory pivot brackets, these are just like stamped 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16 inch steel. They do work just fine, and my truck, which you've seen abused in all of the other videos, still has these on it because I haven't taken the time to swap them out. But we've also seen them tear even with just stock suspension. So these are nice upgraded good pivot bracket. They're all 1/4 inch P&O, laser cut, CNC, bent steel, and just good insurance and a decent upgrade for this stuff. Not mandatory though if you already have factory pivot brackets. All right, so that sums it up for the disassembly side of things. Now we're gonna move on to the reassembly, but in the meantime, we're gonna take a little extra time and clean up the frame rails and the cross member and all the components and paint them up nice, and also do all of the while you're in there sort of things like axle shaft U-joints, axle seals, repacking the wheel bearings, new brakes, just all the little things that are kind of a pain to do when they need to be done, so you may as well take care of them while it's all apart. We're gonna get that done, and then we'll show you installing all the new suspension.
All right, you guys, for this truck, we're installing the F250 leveled kit. So we're gonna require these mild drop brackets. They just go right here in place of your factory pivot brackets on the crossmember. So yeah, let's get started. All right, now that we got our pivot brackets bolted in, I'm gonna move to shock towers. All right, you guys, one thing I wanted to note, I'm not installing the full King air bump stops on mine, but I figured I should show you how. It just utilizes the same 4 bolt holes as a shock tower, as well as 2 of the bottom ones. And one thing you wanna be careful when you go to install those, anything where there's 2 layers of brackets, we offer just a slightly longer bolt, a 40 millimeter versus the 35 millimeter. You just wanna make sure, and it's easy enough to look and just compare them side by side, but you should have a few of these 40 millimeters versus the 35 millimeters, and make sure those get placed wherever you have the 2 layers of 1/4 inch steel. It's just that extra 5 millimeters to make sure the lock nut grabs on the back side. But for this truck, instead of the King air bumps, we're going with just the standard Sumo springs. The bracket for those looks like this, and the only location I'm gonna need a 40 millimeter bolt is on this guy, and it's gonna tuck into the very front hole. Otherwise, the rest of these bolts are all the standard 35 shorter millimeter. All right, I got everything snugged down, not quite cinched. There's still a little wiggle room in there, but it's pretty tight to the frame. So next, I'll cinch up the bottom ones first, and then the side ones after that. I'll just note that I did remove this middle lower one because it interferes with getting my socket on this guy. So I'll do that one very last. All right, we got them all tight as that impact could get them. I still like to go in there and get a wrench on the back, on the nuts, and just make sure I can torque them down nice and tight from the back. All right, shock tower is in, bump stop mount is in. Next, we'll go to radius arm bracket. If you guys are using a lift for your install, you just gotta make sure that where you lift the truck up from the frame is right behind these 4 holes. Those are the factory holes we're gonna be using for the radius arm bracket, and it just gets a little snug. I've got it just tight enough where I feel comfortable with the truck and the balance on the lift, but I'm still able to get the bracket on. All right, and just like before, all I did is snug them all up, and then starting from the bottom, cinch them to the frame. Again, if you can get a ratchet or a wrench back there, we definitely recommend tightening them from behind, getting something on that nut and really snugging it up from behind. On the passenger side, when you go to install your radius arm bracket, I find it easier to remove your e-brake cable, go to the back. It's pretty simple to just remove the bracket and tuck it up out of the way. It just makes it easier to get the impact or ratchet onto the bolt heads. tough to get the impact up there to really snug them down, so I'm just gonna do it by hand. The frame brackets on both sides are basically just mirror image, so the install is essentially exactly the same. Just a reminder that for your bump stop mounts, wherever there's overlapping, you want to make sure you use those longer 40mm bolts. Installing this third member differential into the beam can be a little tricky, and we've tried just about every way you can. What I found to be my favorite is flipping the beam over like this, setting the RTV on the beam itself instead of on the actual differential, and then setting the differential onto it. It helps to have two people, have the one person line it up. A good reference point is where it mounts to the beam right here. Just slide it nice and snug against that and try to plant it right where you want it the first try. And then while your first person's holding it in place, get at least 3 of the bolts started. That'll help keep it in place, and then you can just snug everything down from there. All right, now that we've got all the brackets bolted to the frame, we're gonna work on prepping the beams themselves. We have to get the pivot bushings into them, as well as the differential into the driver's side beam. So let's get started on that. There we go. Nice. All right, as you can see, it's way easier with 2 people, so I'm glad I had the cameraman around to help me with that. I just wanted to note with the pivot bushings in there, this guy, the metal sleeve gets pressed into the beam, but then don't forget this little bushing that goes on the outside. You just have to snug that in there as you slide it up into the pivot bushings. Yeah, there we go. Looking good. Okay guys, as you saw there, even for a couple of guys that have installed quite a few of these kits, they can be tricky, just get lined up. This is best case scenario, we've got a lift, it just takes patience. Sometimes, if you're not on a lift, you're gonna have to use a combination of floor jacks. It's tricky, but it's doable. All you gotta do is just get that hole lined up and get the bolt through there, and you're home safe. These pivot bushings, when you go to install them, they're pretty tight. It's a snug fit in there. You probably saw we had to snug it up one more time just before we installed it, because those bushings are so tight in there, they're trying to expand, trying to push out, and it makes it hard to get it in this tight tolerance pivot bracket here. So we just took a C-clamp, squeezed it down the last second right before we squeeze it into the bracket itself, and that worked for us. Sometimes you can also lube it up. That'll help slide it in there as well. Beams are hung. Next step is radius arms themselves. So we'll throw the radius arm bracket or bolt into the bracket, and we'll pull them up and mate them together up here. Anywhere you have a really tight tolerance like we do with these radius arm bolts, it's always a good idea to throw a little anti-seize on there. Boom. So for both sides on this truck, just wanted to remind you to throw a little anti-seize on there. It really helps if whenever you go to take this apart. Tolerances are so tight, anti-seize is really necessary. What you want to make sure not to do is get the anti-seize on the thread. Just get it on the shank itself. Getting it on the threads can actually allow you to over torque it. It kind of lubes up the threads. So when you go to torque it down to the torque spec, you'll end up over torquing. So yeah, just make sure it's just on the shank itself. guys are pretty simple. All right, guys, with the lower bump stops and the upper reservoir mounts installed, we're all done with the aftermarket kit installation. Now it's just time to get all the OEM components bolted back on, then we can throw wheels back on and go test it out. All right, guys, first things first, we got to get the knuckle installed onto the beam. When we go to do that, we'll be using our adjustable upper camber and caster bushing. I just wanted to note, we like to put some anti-seize on it as well. You want to make sure that it can move freely in there, that it doesn't bind up at all. When you go to torque the ball joints up, you want that to be able to move up and down freely. Otherwise, you could develop some memory steer, and that really sucks. It has nothing to do with your steering components or the suspension. It all comes down to just that ball joint being torqued in there. At a little bit of an angle, it'll bind it all up. The torquing procedure we like to follow for the ball joints is to go 35 on the bottom, then 69 on the top, and then just advance it till you can fit the cotter pin in, and then the bottom one to 150. Right, we got knuckles on. We made sure to get our dust shields on there before we bolted the snout back onto the knuckle. Next step is the hub and rotor. We've got our wheel bearings packed and in there, and I've got the lock nut ready to go. There we go. All right, we've got our first hub on. I just wanted to remind you guys the differences in these locking nuts with the washer. The first one to go on is the one with the little nub on it, and the nub is facing out. And then once we get that torqued to where we want it, then we'll align the washer so that it lines up and locks it into place. And then last but not least is the clean faced nut. It doesn't have any nubs on it. It'll snug up tight. That's the one we really torque down. All right, this first inner nut we're going to tighten to 60 foot-pounds, and as we're doing that, we're going to be rotating the hub to help it seat correctly. Once we get it to the 60 foot-pounds, we'll back it off 90 degrees, and then from there we will try to align that washer, and if the nub doesn't line up perfectly with one of the slots of the washer, we will advance it until it does. With this guy, you'll see this little tab at the top. We'll slide it in there. We'll find the nub that it's supposed to line up with. If it doesn't line up first try, we can flip it around because the holes are all offset. We can try that. If that still doesn't work, then we will advance it as little as we have to in order to line up that little nub with one of these holes. Last but not least, we've got our flat nut without any nubs on it. Get that guy on there, and this outer one we will be torquing down to 150. Oh my gosh. Okay. Lube up these hubs a little bit. If you're paying close attention, you'll notice these hubs are slightly different. My truck came with like the base level selectable lockers. These ones, I believe, were a factory option Warren, so it's not the Warren premium hub, but it's kind of an in-between. And luckily we've got a whole bunch of parts out back, and I just picked a couple of those off and rebuilt them, just clean them up. It's really easy to tear these apart, clean everything out inside, and re-lube it up. They should last you a long time. Yeah. All right, rinse and repeat. We're just doing the passenger side now, exactly the same we did last one. I'm gonna start off by getting some anti-seize on this bushing, and yeah, torque specs, everything's exactly the same. All right, you guys, we are getting super close. We're all done in the wheel well. All we have to do is hook up our steering linkage, and then we'll bleed the brakes and be ready for a test drive. Okay, we got our steering linkages all installed. Everything's torqued down. We got our cotter pins in and set. We'll do a little tape measure alignment once we get it down on its wheels with the weight of the vehicle on it. I think last thing we got to do, other than bleed the brakes, is just locate where we want to drill the hole for our limit strap. All right, one of the only things that doesn't utilize a factory hole on the frame is your limit straps. So the way you're going to locate them, you're going to get your axles at full droop, so the shock is fully extended at its maximum. It's bottomed out right now. Then you're going to take your limit strap, bolt it in there, and you're going to mark it on the frame. You can see this one's a little too long. The one that'll come with your kit will be a little bit shorter, but what you'll do with it bolted in, mark where it is on the frame, and then go up another inch from there. The rule of thumb for limit straps is for every 12 inches in length, they stretch about an inch. So these guys are 12 inches. They're a little too long. We'll have to source maybe something between an 8 to a 10. So it'll stretch a little less than an inch. That way, if you give yourself an inch up there, it'll save your shock from completely bottoming out. That should give you just, I don't know, a quarter to a half inch of stroke that you're safe from bottoming that shock out.
All right, guys, you saw Grant's finished up the install of our TTB50 Coil Over Kit. This is the leveling height one. And so now the last thing to do is go and get it aligned. What we've done is used a tape measure to get the toe as close as possible. TTBs are a little bit funky though in the alignment space. So when you are setting the toe, you also want to roll the truck back and forth, or forward and backwards, after you make some adjustments, and recheck it, because that will change things. But just get it in the ballpark and then take it to a good alignment shop that understands how to align a TTB front suspension. They're not that hard to deal with when you know what you're doing, and especially when it's set up on radius arms and coil springs or coil overs like this. But you definitely want a shop that, you know, does good alignments and not just your average Joe tire shop that is like, we do tires but can also do alignments. So that's pretty much the last thing. Go in, get it aligned, make sure everything's good, and then take it for a drive. But a couple notes on the leveling height, you can fit, 33s or up to 33s with zero trimming of the front bumper, or you can do 35s with mild trimming on the corner of the front bumper. On the 4-inch lift, which is the equivalent of a leveled F350, you can fit 35-inch tires with no trimming and 37-inch tires with mild bumper trimming. So if you want to see more of these videos, please comment, like, and subscribe. And if you want to support us or the channel, obviously buying suspension is killer, but we also have sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, and all of it helps a lot. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you like this video, and please leave a comment letting us know what you think and what you'd like to see in the future.